Welcome to the Rehumanization Station. I am your collaborator, Christopher Jones, aka Dr. X, and this podcast is an extension to my Flippin and Vibin brand, where vibers seek to transform narratives in society, education, and sport. Today is our collaborative praxis series, where we have the enthusiastic viber, Maja, with us today. Maja, how are you doing?
I'm doing so great. It's finally sunny in Durham. It's the best day in ages.
That is a good thing. I'm sorry, I never said your last name. How do you pronounce your last name?
It's Kutlaca.
Kutlaca.
Yes.
Okay. Did I do it right the first time?
Yeah.
Kutlaca. I did it right. Okay.
Yeah, it means funny thing. It means a soup ladle. Actually, in my language. Ladle. Yes.
Okay. How do you feel about that?
I always laughed about it with my dad. So he used to call me actually just a spoon because I'm tiny compared to him.
How big is how tall is your dad?
He's quite tall.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So Maja is a social psychologist with a passion for social change in music. Maja joined Durham in September 2020. Before moving to the UK, Maja lived and worked in the Netherlands and Germany. To be more specific, Maja is an assistant professor in quantitative social psychology at Durham University. And Maja also did a postdoctoral fellow in social psychology at Osnabrück University, Germany.
Yes.
Oh, see, we talked about this. Like, my partner's Austrian, so I'm trying to learn a bit of German. So I think that was all right. Yeah, that's a bit about Maja. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining the show. I really appreciate it. Because you could be anywhere else, but you're here with us today. And also, Maja's research interest is around allyship, collective action, ideology, morality, polarization, prejudice, and social change, right? And today, specifically, we're going to talk a bit about Maja's research. But before we get into Maja's research, we want to know a little bit more about Maja, right? So this is the part of the show where we just vibe and allow listeners to get an idea of your background and your personal interests. Okay, so Maja, what's your story? Tell us a bit about yourself, your birthplace, and family.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. My history. Well, I'm originally from Serbia, from the capital city of Belgrade, and I grew up. So I was born in 1984. I'm not ashamed of my age.
No, 80s baby. Me too. I'm an 80s baby.
Millennials are cool. That's what I'm going to say. Millennials are super cool. But it was an interesting, I guess, time towards the end of what used to be quite a large country in the Balkans called Yugoslavia. It was a communist, socialist country that fell apart and went into a gruesome war in the 90s. Where especially people from Serbia and of Serbian nationalities committed horrible atrocities against people in Bosnia, in Croatia, also Slovenia, engaged in quite a bloody civil war, and then also followed that with quite horrible things that happened in Kosovo as well towards the end of the 90s. So in a way, my childhood was weird.
Okay.
Let's put it like that. And I guess I never really knew as a child what it was to grow up in a peaceful place or something.
How did that make you feel?
I guess you don't know what you're missing until you see it in a way.
Oh, right.
So I think I only really realized that when I moved away and to the Netherlands because I got a scholarship to study there.
Okay, congratulations.
So yeah, I guess as a kid, my parents, especially my father, was very much involved in trying to overturn this disgusting regime of Milosevic that was involved in all these atrocities. So I grew up with a dad that went every day to protest, that was, taking pots and pans and making noise every day after work. My whole house was always like covered with resistance against the... it was always, there was a fist on our door, resistance flags everywhere around. Wow, so it was quite and that was just a normal thing.
Okay.
So that was quite nice. So I thought, oh, well, that's how everyone grows up, basically. All my friends.
That's what happens when you're young, right?
Yeah. So that was kind of, and then I witnessed this, I think, so in 1999 there was a NATO intervention where the war came right also to my door as well. So kind of having that experience, wasn't a great experience. But then at some point during my studies, I did actually my first education was music. So I planned to be a musician. I wasn't, I think, that great at talent, but I did love music a lot, and I played piano for many years.
Okay.
And at some point during my studies, I also thought, actually, I also have other interests, and I started studying psychology, and really, it's now what I do. And I got this opportunity, really, really great opportunity to study in the Netherlands, and that's when I moved. And that was really, from a post-communist, very city of Belgrade, coming into this tiny little town of Groningen, that I know how to pronounce now, which is from, 15th century, the university that already exists for 400 years, where people cycle every day to work, where there's almost no poverty. There were, a couple of homeless people that everyone bought coffees to. It was a completely different experience of life.
How did you navigate that?
At the beginning, it was just awkward. Right. I mean, on one hand, you think, oh wow, people have figured it out somewhere. Somewhere it looks like it's rich, it's wealthy, it's all of that. And then you kind of realize at the same time with the rich and wealth and have met many amazing friends, Dutch friends that I have for a lifetime. At the same time, you realize that the history of wealth also comes from quite a horrible colonial history of the Dutch society that still at that point had the Zwarte Piet, the Black Piet and black-facing figure as part of their traditional holiday. Right. So that was shocking to see for someone from the outside. So you have this like polar opposites in the society.
Okay, I got you.
So, but I guess, it was a change to life, and but amazing opportunity to study and to learn from the great scholars there. So this is where I also then decided to do my PhD. And throughout my master's that I've done there, protesting was a big part of my life where I grew up. It wasn't something that came, or you could see a lot in the Netherlands, but it was the years of the aftermath of the financial crisis, so 2010 and 11, which started affecting then quite a bit of the European economies, and austerity measures were brought up. Okay. And it affected especially the south of European countries. And there was a lot of protests, and the Occupy movement became quite big. And the real democracy became quite big, and I joined as students were joining the occupations and the protests. And then I thought, actually, I really always enjoyed this, and I thought it was important, so I thought maybe I should turn it into a study.
Okay, nice.
And this is how I wrote my PhD proposal.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. Yeah, and then I spent next 4 or 5 years working on that. And from there on, moving to do my postdoctoral studies. So in the PhD, I worked a little more on like why people protest, who are directly affected by certain things, and then coming to the postdoctoral studies, understanding why people come in solidarity with other people.
Okay.
So, and then surprise, surprise, during 2019, I was looking for a job, as most academics, find themselves with
I hear you on that one right now.
and then there was a position here in Durham that I've never heard of before.
Okay. Okay, so you never heard of Durham. It was just a random place for you. Okay.
Yeah.
But now you're here.
Now I'm here in the place, as I always say, where Harry Potter first movie was filmed.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you. That's a rich lived experience, I'd say. So what activities bring you peace, love, and happiness then, if throughout your life? Like, what do you enjoy doing? Obviously, it seems like protesting is a influential thing, but what maybe anything outside of that?
Music has always been a big part of my life.
You still play the piano at all? Or?
Yes, a little bit, but I do really love classical music, so I go to quite a few concerts and operas. I know it's up, but I just grew up with it, so I continue to do that. And I also enjoy bringing other people to classical music who have not done it, so I kind of feel myself always...
bringing people in? I've never done it before either, so maybe one day.
There, I will definitely. I'm a good person to start with.
Okay, classical music, okay.
Classical music.
Any artists in particular that comes to mind?
Well, I grew up with Bach being Bach being the composer. One.
I'm not a music historian, but I do know who that is. Okay.
So that's it. So I think music is a big thing. I want to say reading was definitely always a big thing that I always loved to do. I feel I do a bit less since I became an assistant professor.
Why do you think that is?
It's too much reading during the day.
That's a great point.
Marking.
And what type of, what was your genre that you used to, your go-to genre that you like to read?
I think I used to love science fiction.
Okay. That's all right. I mean, we all have our own taste. Okay.
And then from there on, I like all different kind of inspired historical books or something that reflects on people's stories. Not like historical books based on actual like things, but inspired by them. So fictional history and just knowing different cultures and so on. So, but yeah, I'm rediscovering in the beginning of my 40s again, science fiction again, which I'm enjoying.
I'm still trying to get into science fiction. I haven't done it yet, but I need to, because I know Afrofuturism is getting really big right now, so it'd be good to do that. Well, then, okay, since we learned a little bit more about your lived experiences and what you like to do, what could you think of any people who have been influential to you at different stages of your life? I know you talked about your father.
It's an interesting question. I guess a lot of my colleagues, especially throughout the last years, meeting some of very, very inspirational female psychologists, academics who come from very much marginalized background, and seeing them as superstars, I would say those are my currently biggest fans. I'm giving a shout out to Melis and Helena, who I work with in a network. Okay. So they're my inspiration. I'm thinking.
When it comes to psychology, is it a mix when it comes to gender, sex, or is it male dominated or no?
It's an interesting field that oftentimes, at least in the places where I've studied, has at the undergraduate levels a lot of females identifying who study. But then as you come to the professorial level and so on, in some departments it's usually balanced. But some departments are also very much male dominated. So it flips very much as you come to the...
Okay,
but there are, I think, and it's at least in the places, in the institutions I've worked, it's extremely white. So it's, and not diverse in many other aspects in terms of sexual orientation, gender identities, disability and all of that. It's not a very...
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's partly because of the discipline maybe, or?
I think definitely discipline, which is very much, I think has been at the center of justifying and normalizing status quo. I mean, yeah. Okay. I mean, some of our founders have, including Freud or Bina Simon, have contributed really, really badly to humanity. Okay. But I mean, other thing, I mean, I don't know if you agree, but I think it's just academia.
I mean, I would co-sign with that. I would co-sign with that. Okay.
I mean, it's academic world is yet there, especially in the global North institution is not diverse. I think that's just what it. Yeah.
Okay, so you would say your father and your colleagues.
Yeah.
That you've. Okay. What about some challenging moments as a scholar for you? Like, how did you navigate them? How have you navigated them so far?
I guess building support networks, finding jobs, and surviving in a kind of extremely competitive environment. It can be very daunting, and I mean you're experiencing, but like when you're from a visa, you have to deal with the visa, deal with the fact that there are limited financial supports around you, then that you have to run around and prove, in addition to having to publish a lot and for yourself you're the best, you constantly have to show your best. I hate it, but like that's I think that's having a great support network among my peers was what kept me going, and also support of my partner. So and my parents, who were cheering me that I should. I don't know if I navigated them well. I guess yes, I have a permanent job, but I think a lot of us suffer from poor mental health and dealing with the toll that all this struggle brings with it.
And that's my other question. So I guess we've talked about. I guess it depends on the person, doesn't it? And I think that's what we're going to get into about. Today we're going to get into allyship and how do we and the multiple perspectives behind that, right? I guess because you're saying it's certain things can be taxing being a scholar, but do you feel everyone feels that? Not everyone, but do you feel, how many people do you feel have that type of a mentality around really trying to make a difference? Because social psychology obviously is a field where you would want to at least make people be better human beings, right? Or enhance the human experience in a positive way, right? So, don't know.
I think one of the challenges, first, is on the one hand in our field, is that one of our key founders of our field, Henry Tajfel, who is the social identity theory founder that we base most of our work on, turns out to be a sexual harasser.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So how's that been negotiated?
It's been a difficult conversation in the field where, on the one hand, this is the basis of what we talk about, group identities, struggle for power, and all of that this person wrote and started, and on whose premises we built on and continue legacy, and we all cite these papers, but then there's this other side, right. This person, which is pretty horrible, and even led to like for many years, the main award, for instance, in the European Association was named after him. Now it's revoked precisely because, well, it's a little bit...
morals. Okay, wow. Okay.
So...
And can you repeat the name again?
Henry Tashfel.
Henry Tashfel, okay.
And I think, coming into this whole allyship thing, I mean, I was hired on a project led by Professor Julia Becker in Germany, in Osnabrück, where I started getting embedded into the topic. It made me really more aware, I guess, as I was researching, of all the problems that our literature has in how it defines issues, defines groups, how it treats power, what it ascribes to people from powerful and privileged groups.
I hear you. Thank you for that intro, because that's what we're going to get into now. We're gonna let's flip it, okay? So now we will get more into your work and how you flip the script to like traditional narratives within it, right? And I've had a chance to do an overview of some of your research and articles that you shared with me. Much of it is around what it means to be an ally and the multiple perspectives we should consider. So for our Viber audience and us too, let's flip it. Let's flip the ally script, shall we? So what are your perceptions of, I would say, a traditional or normative narratives within your field, within your work that you do in allyship?
So I think my first readings when I started getting acquainted was this idea that being an ally is something amazing. No, we all need allies. Allies to do stuff, and they're both this amazing people, selfless, wonderful, altruistic, Mother Teresa's of this world. And then at the same time, they're also, not only they're these wonderful people, they have all this power, that to actually bring about all this change. And that was kind of a thing you could read in almost all papers. I think one or two were very, very critical of, and a couple of researchers in US and in Canada, but who were kind of on a side, well, allies, great, but I mean, they can also be very selfish in the reasons and in actions that they engage, and we need to be aware of that, and we shouldn't portray this as this amazing, wonderful, selfless individuals. So that's one. And the second one was that, it was an assumption that they can do stuff, but can they? Are they really that powerful? I mean, I'm a quant hypothesis-driven person. I'd like to test that and show that is actually true. Or maybe not. So, yeah.
Okay, so how much I keep hearing individual, or how much do you feel like the culture, this Western culture about individualism and prioritizing single figures as this entity that we should follow, how much do you feel like that could have an impact on how we view, how allies are viewed, or activists are viewed?
I that's a great point. I mean, again, oftentimes, and I still in my research, and we haven't moved through it, it's really about this one individual that brings about something great. And sometimes it's important to study from the individual perspective. But that gives center and power that this one individual doesn't actually have. And makes them into, we talked just briefly about like this cult of hero. But actually, if we think about a more useful perspective and where allies are, it's a group, it's a collective that stands behind an idea rather than one person with the name.
It's a collaborative practice.
It's a collaborative practice, exactly.
Okay. And so within I remember within some of the papers, what do you think, there were some multiple motivations behind it. So there was this out-group focus, which was it was like differentiating between the positive and negative motivations behind allyship. Can you expand on that? So there was out-group focused, in-group focused, personal motivations, and then also moral motivations. And could you kind of get into that bit if you like to? Okay.
So first of all, this needs an amazing shout out of my colleague and one of my closest friends, Helena Radke, who led this work on motivation. Yes. To start with, but basic idea is we have this notion of selfless or other-centered motivations versus self-centered and egoistic motivations. Now, I don't like to put labels on whether something is positive or negative, because everything can lead to bad things. But I think it's important to understand that in humans have these multiple motives in them, and that all of us, even if we think we're the most selfless people, we engage in things also to better ourselves. So I think that's the first thing. But it's important to know that we are, these are dimensions, right? We don't see this. I think oftentimes what especially psychology does is categorizes people. But when we talk about the motivations, we're all in a dimension. We can be more oriented towards other and less towards ourselves, and that can change. So I think that's important. When it comes to then understanding and how this work went about, is that within these other-oriented, selfless motivations, or what we would term genuine motivations for allyship, is that there is a focus on, there are those that arise from care for a certain specific group. So that's the other group-oriented motivations, and that can be different for different people. You can be, for instance, centering on the identity of a race or ethnicity or religious group, gender group, all these kind of things. And the other one, which is related to it, is a moral motivation, but rather than centering on a specific group and context, it's about those more broad general concepts such as equality, justice, or fairness that can lead you to act. So those are the two. And the other two are kind of a flip of these. So the in group, what we term is that you consider the other group and their struggle, but actually in the end, you're still motivated about protecting your own group, right? So yes, you recognize that perhaps, there is some inequality between the groups, but ultimately you don't want your group to look bad, for instance, and you're motivated to still keep the relative, you can reduce the difference, but you're not rejecting it. Okay. And another one from the individual level is about, as we have, moral values and so on, we can also just think about, well, there are people who care about their image, how they're seen, or care about, bettering their own self. And that could be, as I said, I don't like to necessarily use all negative labels, or so the bettering of the self can be more the selfish and negative in terms of the image, but can be about, learning experiences or, having a more open mind or something like that. So there are various, again, aspects to it.
Right. Okay. And for me, it seems like there's this ambiguity of being an ally, right? Or allyship is fluid, can be fluid.
Yes, very much so.
Okay. So I guess we never even identify what an ally is. Just, do you have a simple definition for our audience that comes to mind?
It's a debated thing.
Yeah, well, I hear that, because we just said it's fluid, but is there anything that just...
I think what we kind of descriptively agree is an ally can be a person who acts on behalf of someone else, so doesn't act for their group or their own interests, but acts on behalf of somebody else. Now we would call an ally also a person that is more likely to be higher on those genuine motivations and reduce those ingenuine ones. However, that's sometimes very hard to, know. You can't really look in someone's brains and know exactly what their motivations are. But we would call allies, we're more likely to call allies who both act consistently on behalf of another group and are motivated predominantly by genuine and or most solely by genuine motivations. So
okay, and I think that's the other side of the coin, right? Is the genuine aspect of it, because I know you mentioned about performative allyship, right? And I think what I wanted to kind of get into as well was trust. We talk about this a lot, even in the research that we do together. Maya and I are doing research with the Pro Northeast. It's to increase PGRs from racially minoritized backgrounds, specifically in the Northeast, right? And a lot of what came out of the analysis was about trust, right? And when I was doing the reading, it seems like allyship comes with the layers of trust, it seems, right? So for groups who are, quote unquote, from the out group, the quote unquote disadvantaged groups, right? How do those groups navigate how to trust other allies? So
I think it's so difficult.
I mean, I know there's no right answer, but I know you talk about this in your article. I don't know if you want to like expand on what I was saying.
I think, and perhaps, you can also ascribe this to my background, but I think cynicism and suspicion is a good way to always have a little bit.
Okay. So everyone should have that.
Everyone, especially anyone from the more marginalized and disadvantaged groups, trusting an ally, I think there is always good to be take it with a little bit of like reservation to it. Right. I think it's one of these very difficult relationships to navigate. And I think because you never know, and ideally, our allies would be always there, always willing to act, always willing to take the back seat and be there to support, never be there to, take the center and make it about themselves. Whether that's realistic, maybe for some, yes, but
right. It's ambiguous. So, and then I guess that goes to people who are allies, right? You also mentioned about meta beliefs. So meta beliefs is beliefs about how others perceive us, right? And that has an influential factor if we do become allies as well, right? How often do you see that in the work that you do?
So this is one of the work we cited, one of the excellent papers in our special issue. Shout out to the authors, who is an amazing former PhD student of my colleague Ayadra, who published this work that really, really provides an important reflection that allies have can have their own beliefs about how they are perceived. Now, they might, everybody, I would say everybody wants to be perceived in a good way, but they might also suspect that they may not always be perceived in that way. And that can also affect how they act, right? If they might think that the others don't trust them, or that they are not, doing and being the best people. But I think bringing back to the trust issue, I think if allies, and especially those who they act for, and allies are willing to learn and change, and in trusting in that process that they will be able to learn and change. I think from that part, that could be the most transformative and the most genuine way allies can be parts of the movement.
Okay, and to like expand on that, and groups who are disadvantaged in a sense. There was also mention about trusting or having more, being a bit, I forgot what the word was, but it's like more, I would say being angrier at someone who does put on performative allyship someone who puts on performative allyship rather than someone who outright is not an ally at all, if that makes sense, is against something, right? How often do your colleagues and yourself get into that, see that within your work, if you get what I'm saying?
So the thing about the performativity part, I think I haven't seen it much. I think it's something to really look into, whether we are more disappointed by those who, say they will do something, but they don't.
I know me for a fact. If there's somebody who's supposed to be on board and then comes out being a fraud, Malcolm X has this quote about wolf in sheep's clothing, stuff like that. I'd much rather have someone who is like Trump. I guess you can actually know what that person is, what they're preaching, rather than someone who's hiding behind that, right, and trying to be this outward ally, if that makes sense. But sorry I interrupted. Go ahead.
No. I think there is definitely, as I said, suspicion and being angry about it. I think that's always a healthy way to approach it. I do think, though, that there is a point in expressing that anger, and if the other person is willing to learn from it, then there may be, potential to salvage that relationship and that ally being actually changing. So there is some work that shows that there is a lot of disappointment in allies, and that can affect also the mental health and well-being of activists, having to deal with performativity a lot. So it's extremely draining. But there is a possibility, I'm not saying for all, that performative allies might learn and might be able to change. So not only is lost on them. I think that's why it's important to also communicate that anger and communicate that disappointment and hold them responsible to what they say they're supposed to do.
Right. And how should people hold performative allies responsible? Is there any methods that you know of, or?
I think, that's a great research question. Thank you. I'll steal that for my next project with students. This is something we would love to. We're actually trying to kind of understand the best way how to approach that and communicate that in the most effective way to enable them to change. But at least some of the work I know is that communicating anger while still providing a potential to, do something better. So show up for the next action, take a responsibility for this, might communicate then, this is, yes, I'm very disappointed, but there is a possibility to amend the relationship.
Okay.
And I think that from the other side might be, a way. So it's not about completely distancing, which is also perfectly fine. I think that's also fair to distance from those. But if we want to try to, influence and then kind of help them transform, if people, of course, have the ability and the time and energy to do it, then is that extra labor, unfortunately. However, that doesn't have to necessarily be the labor of the minoritist activists. That can be a labor of other allies to bring. So I would say it's not a responsibility at all on the activists to do that, because they already have so. But other allies can step in that sense and be like, hello.
And that was also an indicator of gaining trust, right?
Yeah.
Seeing... I guess groups seeing allies be bystanders, at least in a group sense.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
Nice. Okay.
So it's not at all responsibility of the actors, because that's always an extra labor. Why?
Yeah, and I think that's why this work is so fascinating that y'all do, because even within that y'all show kind of how even with the performativity or motivations, there is still some positives that could come out of that, like just having, if somebody is being that way, but at the same time there is this awareness that's being put out there, so it can influence certain individuals, right? So yeah, I thought that was amazing. If people want to read that, it's in the Journal of Social Psychology, European Journal of Social Psychology. One of the articles we're talking about is called "Understanding Allies' Participation in Social Change: A Multiple Perspectives Approach." Right? Yeah, I thought that was amazing. And do you have any other comments around allyship that we haven't kind of talked about yet, or
I mean,
social change?
yeah, I think what for instance I've been really thinking about and reflecting on my work is that we often write about allyship, and I try to say the whole point of a multiple perspective is that you cannot say that something is right or wrong without asking those who you're acting for whether they think it's right or wrong. So it's not just enough to ask the allies, you think this is okay? No, you have to ask those disadvantaged groups and so on. And I think I'm hoping to in my future work to do more also these collaborations, how we do work together, right? So we bring both perspectives to it, and we write from truly both, even more perspectives. Some of the authors, thinking of people who have many multiple intersectional identities there to bring forward, to some privileged, some disadvantaged, right? So more and more collaboration across I think are necessary for the field.
Cross-cultural context.
Yeah,
you're definitely right. That's that collaborative praxis, right?
Yeah.
And I guess since we've been talking about all of this, your work, could you just share quickly a particular moment that you considered a turning point in your research while you've been doing this work, whether it be prior to Durham or during Durham University?
That's an interesting. I guess I think it was always good to read what some people say to our studies. Now, I'm a trained experimental psychologist, so I mostly do a little bit of design, a little bit of a vignettes or stories around it, and I ask people to give me some comments about it, and I mostly care about their what they answered 1 to 7.
Okay.
But reading those answers, for instance, I provided them context with protests of Black Lives Matter where white people were there and present, because that happens. I mean, there are situations where they're there, and just reading what different people have reflected when they've said about these protests made me realize that this is actually really important to know. And of course, seeing the different aspect, for instance, a Black American participant writing was like, really, there were that many white people there? I've never seen them before, And then reading from a white American participant perspective, saying, oh yeah, these are my great heroes. I was like, I always go to this protest. I was like, and understanding that these are actually really two different ways of you can read that. So I think that was always. And then I think another thing that both Helena and a couple of our colleagues we always had when we present this work is that we get this question, and I'm not gonna, I can elaborate on my answer, but I always get asked, so do you really think that the white, cis, straight male can be the leader of change and be the best ally? What is your answer to that?
What is your answer to that?
Well, no.
And why? Okay, but this for our audience, why do you feel like that is? Why do you feel that is?
I think the best way is to be there to support, never to lead.
Okay, that's a great way to sum that up. Okay, we'll sum it up with that right there. Okay, now I have another question about what. So with your work, and you said you reflected on what changed how you're flipping the script to traditional narratives when it comes to allyship, right? But where do you see your work leaving a lasting legacy for, I would say, for future generations? Yeah, just.
I think I would hope
within your field. So yeah.
I think where I really would like to see is that more and more critical approach to allyship, and to the very concept, the very definition of the concept, moving away from whatever I've done and so on. I think science is about transforming and changing. I don't think everything we've done now in here should not be the thing that is, true in even 5 years, let alone 50. So science is always about changing. But at least having this approach that it's important to step away from idolizing and making certain groups or individuals into heroes and being very critical about it. That doesn't mean that it's not useful and effective and important, but having a more nuanced approach, as I said, like even with the motivations, it's not about good or bad.
It's just about
it's about nuancing.
Nuancing. Everyone has different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's like I said, when I was reading that definitely hit home, I guess you could say. It made me really think and I guess it allows you to be more curious and be more open to different people, right? And that's definitely an inclusive approach, I'd say. But thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. And we're going to get to our concluding questions, right? So we're now going to conclude the part of the show with where you will offer us insight around rehumanization. Right? I'm not sure how familiar you are with the term, but I mean, we'll see. If you could reflect on your journey thus far, what do you know now that you wish you knew before?
It's always a tricky one, I guess. Appreciating that getting the opposite of what the literature told me, right? Because a lot of our theorizing or thinking about creating in our hypothesis, we base it on what's done before. And then when you see the biased literature, I'm sure you have experienced this in sociology as well.
Yes.
You tend to form an opinion, right? This is what is presumably true. And now, actually, I was quite happy that a lot of my hypotheses did not come true.
Okay.
No, because it was a great learning experience to make me rethink how I view, first of all, the literature and the methods that have been used, the conclusions, and the singular perspective that often existed in the published work. So I'm happy that a lot of hypotheses did not work, and I could learn from them and change the way.
Oh, that's good. That's a great point, because when I'm thinking about my PhD journey in the beginning, I was reading, I think it was Durkheim, and they were talking about Africans were savages, etc. And I was sometimes I would have reflective notes for different papers or books that I'd read. And one of them in the beginning, I have it saved, and I just put, just because white people created everything doesn't mean they have the right to treat us that way. But in reality, white people didn't create everything. And then I learned more of my history. Africans created pretty much had to really have a lot of contributions towards history, right? And I mean, those are things I didn't learn in school, right? I learned more about, like I said, individuals. Go back to individuals, or I would say groups, like European groups, white males in particular. I guess this is why you mean white cis heterosexual men can't really run things, because they've been the ones who've been, I guess,
they've been running the show all the time. I'm sorry. We need to move away from that. It's time. It was time so long ago.
I hear you on that. Even me, I feel the same way as far as, just even with me, my idea, I think, it's definitely, it takes a village, doesn't it? It takes more than one person. But I guess, that's the traditional narrative, isn't it? Is about glorifying an individual or a specific group of individuals, right? And how we transform. But all right. And this is my last question for you. Okay. What does rehumanization look like to you?
I think it's the acceptance of nuances, what we talked about. It's really about moving from the binary idea of humans being all good, all bad, all right, all wrong. Rehumanizing is accepting that we all have so many multiple experiences, personalities, motivations, cultural backgrounds, and they will all influence together. And I think the psychology as a science really needs to move towards appreciating the cultural narratives, the experiences, the multiple diverse experiences and voices that have been excluded for a long time, at least from the global north psychology, to start treating people as appreciating just how fascinating they are in their multiple ways. So,
yeah. Thank you. That was a great answer. Yeah, that makes me, definitely around this. So rehumanization is nuance, right? Allowing people to be themselves, really, isn't it? I'm in sociology, right? But I did draw on a lot of social psychology. I think that's really good because there's both that objective and subjectiveness, but it's not like, I don't know, it's not distinct with one or the other. You can use both, right? I think that's important. But no, thank you for today. That was amazing. Do you have any other final comments that you want to make?
No, I really enjoyed it. It's also nice to kind of reflect on work. I don't think we do this quite often. We're all bogged down in writing our articles. But yeah, I shout out to the viewers and listeners to all provide and share their perspectives. I think just to celebrate all of us in our multiplicity and yeah.
I definitely came out of this, but even came out of like your work, you and your colleagues' work, with a different perspective on things, and definitely like, I guess, enhances my argument on how we should flip the script. So I thank you for that. Do you have any social media handles or platforms that you use, or no, nothing?
I am a very
discreet, stay low key. That's fine. I mean, being low key is okay. It's okay. But if you do want to find Maja, she does work for Durham University. You can just Google her. Or maybe send her
I'm
email.
on ResearchGate. Very
ResearchGate
very
too, right?
academic,
Yeah.
nerdy. I'm on
That's true, too.
ResearchGate there.
There we go. All right, there we go. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, just some reflections. I think that was an amazing talk with Maja. We talked about allyship, what that looks like. I think one of the main ideologies that came out from my perspective was this whole, there isn't necessarily positive or negatives. It's about looking at things from a nuanced perspective. I think that was very important because we tend to judge people, and we tend to, we're so focused on being judged as well. I think it's important that we are able to work together in a way where it's not taxing, where we always have to think about other people's motivations whenever we do this type of work, right? Because it's already taxing because there's so much work to do, and at times there's few of us doing it, right? So I think it's very important that when we do create these, we do have collective action and we create spaces of solidarity, it is important to know that there shouldn't necessarily just be one leader, right? We're all working together, and I think that's the main important thing, is to not rely on just one individual. And I think that is part of flipping the script, and I think that is part of what Maja is doing, and I think that was an amazing work with what Maja and her colleagues are doing. And definitely, I think that's what I took the most out of it, is that it's about being open and curious to different types of experiences and different types of people who are willing to do the work, right? And not necessarily assume the worst or the best, and try our best to not be so focused on the rewards that we will receive if we do such work, right? It's about just doing things from an altruistic perspective, but how do we do that, right? I think that's, again, that goes back to allyship is very fluid, right? And that's the main thing I got out of it. But it was an amazing talk. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I'm excited about the next episode. One love.